I'm 30 years old now, and a few months ago, the bank called to confirm a loan application for $150,000. But I hadn't applied for a loan, and I didn't even know about it. I later learned that my sister Olivia's ideal wedding had been financed by my parents taking out a sizable debt in my name. I was never very connected to Olivia, who was lavished with attention from an early age. Even if my parents could share part of the blame, Olivia should have had ample time to think things through at the age of 25. We seldom ever see each other, even at family get-togethers. Finding out that my parents, with whom I had seldom communicated in a long time, had taken out a sizable loan without my knowledge and had even included me as a co-signer was the moment that startled me. Olivia and her fiancé John have, I suppose, been together for a year or so. I wasn't even invited to the wedding, which was the reason for the loan, even though they got engaged a few months earlier. I wasn't too upset about it because I had anticipated not being invited, and my parents never brought it up, so I didn't see it as a problem. After receiving the call from the bank, I quickly phoned my parents. At first, I thought it was some mistake, but my parents immediately admitted the truth, even going as far as defending Olivia, saying, as her sister, it's only natural to support her wedding, even if it means signing under your own name. Apparently, Olivia had discussed her need for money for the wedding with my parents, and they couldn't bring themselves to refuse her. Surprisingly, both Olivia and John are employed and should have sufficient income. Nevertheless, they claimed they couldn't cover the wedding expenses on their own funds and pleaded with my parents. Had it not been for Olivia's plan for an extravagant wedding, they could have managed without relying on our parents' assets. They even consulted John's parents, but they refused to pay and set firm limits. So why didn't my parents respond in the same way? To make matters worse, my parents anticipated that I would not agree to the loan, and they even forged my signature. They decided that confirming with me would be too much of a hassle, choosing instead not to contact me at all. When I learned this fact, I couldn't contain my anger toward my parents. But the loan had already been approved, and it was too late for me to do anything. Determined to somehow resolve this situation, I decided to take my parents to court. My father kept repeating, "It's only natural for you to help your sister as a family." Furthermore, he tried to dissuade me by saying, "If you file a lawsuit, you'll only hurt the family," using my sister's involvement as a reason. After hanging up the phone in anger, I realized my father was only worried about the wedding and the impact on my sister, showing no concern over the fact that my parents had committed fraud. Afterward, I solidified my decision to take legal action, informed my parents of my intentions, and resolved to sever ties with my family. I then called the bank and requested a copy of the documents signed when the loan was contracted. I began preparing to cut ties with my family. After carefully planning the legal steps to avoid a major fallout, I contacted a lawyer. To understand the situation fully, I needed to know every detail. While reviewing the loan contract, I felt a sense of despair. What particularly caught my attention was the condition that the loan had to be repaid within 2 years. This was a heavy burden for me. My parents knew that I was planning to start my own business in the near future. Despite having spent months securing funding and seeking investors, my parents had shown no regard for my plans. They should have known I intended to quit my job soon, meaning I wouldn't have a stable income for a while. Yet now I'm in a situation where a single late payment would trigger the obligation to repay the $150,000 loan. It seemed my parents hadn't really considered just how heavy a burden this would be, thinking my future and personal plans were irrelevant. I logged into Facebook and searched for my sister's fiancé, John. At that moment, I felt something shift within me. If they had dragged me into this situation, I felt I needed to let everyone know the truth. I detailed how my parents had taken out a loan in my name, forged my signature, and drafted all the paperwork without my consent. I advised John to break off the engagement immediately and reconsider marrying into a family capable of such actions. Additionally, I sent the same message to my sister's friends, relatives, and my parents. I felt they all deserved to know the truth. Yet deep down, I wondered if I had gone a bit too far. I also wanted to confirm if my sister herself knew about the situation. She was always close to our parents, so it was hard to imagine they would do something like this without her knowledge. The response was immediate. My parents were furious. They desperately begged me to retract my statements and repeatedly reached out to my sister. It turned out my sister was unaware of the loan or the fact that I was made the co-signer. Upon learning the truth, she was not only upset about being lied to but also angry that she would now have to cover the wedding expenses herself. And she was livid with our parents. As usual, my mother became emotional, loudly blaming me for destroying everything and insisting I had no right to interfere. My parents condemned me for telling John and his family the truth, but I paid them no mind. Looking back now, I wonder if there was ever truly a need to support my sister to such an extent. My parents intended to deceive me to give her the money. But then I heard from my sister, who had learned the whole story. She said, "I wasn't told about the loan, but you should have discussed it with our family before telling John and his family." My sister accused me of ruining her marriage and wedding plans. She's not entirely wrong. I admit I should have discussed the issue with the family first. But did she truly know nothing about it? I began to feel uneasy, wondering if I had gone too far by exposing the truth. Had I really done the right thing? Since I had dragged John's family into the situation and created chaos, I decided to take responsibility and resolve it once everything was settled. However, I remained firm in my decision to pursue legal action. The bank responded, stating that they would investigate the fraudulent loan application, and since the loan wasn't fully processed, I was told I wouldn't be responsible for any payments. Fortunately, a few days later, I managed to find the contact information to speak directly with John and his family. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from my parents, relatives, friends, and messages from my sister. Everyone was blaming me, saying, "You shouldn't have made a family issue public. You went too far." My sister angrily called, saying John and his family were reconsidering the wedding itself because of what I had said, leaving me extremely confused. She accused me, saying I had trampled on her life. She was deeply distressed, as she hadn't known anything about the loan or the co-signing that my parents had arranged. Hearing my sister blame me left me shocked. She advised me that if I had an issue, I should have contacted our parents directly rather than severing ties. When I emailed John and his parents, I was certainly overcome by anger, but I didn't think my actions were wrong at the time. I asked my sister, "You knew everything, didn't you?" But she kept insisting it's none of my business. So I once again told her how our parents had always prioritized her over me, always saying yes to her, and now committing fraud under my name to fulfill her wishes. She wasn't willing to accept that easily, since she didn't seem to be lying. I began to wonder if I had been wrong to assume she was involved in the first place. I wasn't sure whether to trust my sister, but I wasn't ready to give up so easily. The next morning, I received a call from my mother. She was extremely upset, crying on the phone and desperately pleading with me to reconsider. My mother told me that John had broken off his engagement with my sister, but when I spoke with her last night, she didn't mention it at all. She only said the situation was difficult, without a word about him ending the engagement. I was shocked but couldn't express it. And my mother told me how distraught my sister was and how much she blamed me. It seemed that my suggestion for him to reconsider the engagement had made him feel the situation was grave. My mother went on for quite some time about how I had ruined my sister's life, torn our family apart, and caused everyone pain. I listened quietly, feeling both a sense of guilt and a strange conviction that I hadn't acted wrongly. In some corner of my heart, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing my parents suffer. I felt genuinely sorry that my sister's wedding had fallen apart. When my mother finished speaking, I firmly stated, "I'm not going to apologize for telling them the truth." I reminded her not to forget that they had committed fraud. I am not the villain here. I criticized my parents for signing those documents without my consent. My mother still seemed unable to grasp the situation. The rest of the week passed in a daze, but my mother kept repeating that I should have turned a blind eye to keep the family together and maintain peace. I was able to avoid contact with my family, but rumors quickly spread that something was wrong, and relatives began offering their opinions on my response. Some people encouraged me, saying, "You have every right to be angry," while others advised, "You shouldn't make family matters public like this." During this time, my sister started posting aggressively on social media, venting her feelings without directing it at anyone in particular, myself, her friends, or anyone else. I felt uncomfortable with people who, without fully understanding the situation, expressed sympathy and support. They wrote whatever they pleased about how people only wanted to see things get worse or that the worst betrayal came from people like that. But I had no intention of engaging. I wasn't interested in a social media battle with my own sister. A few days later, my sister contacted me again. She was still angry, but a bit calmer than before. She told me, "The engagement has officially been called off. I'm breaking up with John, and his family has completely cut off contact with me." She also mentioned that she'd be moving out of the shared house and planned to stay with a friend for a while. However, what she said next truly shocked me. She admitted to me that she had known about the loan. I was stunned. After all her declarations of being uninvolved and knowing nothing about our parents' actions, she finally admitted that she had been aware of it from the beginning. She insisted, "I might have gone about it the wrong way, but I thought everything would be fine once the wedding was over," she added. "I didn't think it would become such a big deal." Furthermore, she mentioned that she hadn't expected the bank to contact me directly. When I asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she replied, "I was too scared to say anything." It seemed they had planned to keep everything a secret from me. My sister was worried that if I found out, it would jeopardize the wedding. But that worry became a reality when she said, "I thought he'd marry me once things settled down." I couldn't hide my surprise. However, after he broke things off, she no longer felt the need to keep it a secret. I was filled with guilt over my sister's situation. For the past week, I had been racked with guilt until I learned that she knew about the loan. My sister seemed angry only because her plan had failed, not because her relationship with John had ended. In her anger, she called me a terrible person and immature, to which I responded, "I owe you nothing, and I don't need to return any favors." At that moment, I realized just how damaged our family relationships were, and I was certain there was no going back. After talking with her, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. My family had never truly cared about me. I no longer needed to worry about people who were indifferent toward me. However, that conversation did nothing to lessen the fallout. Though I hadn't been in touch with my parents for some time, they persistently reached out to me over the following weeks. My relationship with my parents only worsened, and numerous relatives called me, trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit. They said, "Aren't they your parents?" and asked, "Isn't there another way?" They seemed willing to overlook the fact that my parents had committed fraud, and they thought legal action was unjust. So, I ignored their attempts to persuade me. I kept in regular contact with my lawyer, dedicating myself to gathering as much evidence as possible. The more I learned about my parents' actions, the angrier I became. Not only had they forged my signature, but they had also altered financial records and falsified income to secure the loan. Fortunately, the bank respected my perspective and decided I held no responsibility for the loan. Furthermore, my parents found themselves in serious legal trouble, and the family conflict intensified even more. My sister started living with friends, moving out of her apartment completely to start a new life. She blamed me for her breakup with John, and she was also angry at our parents for creating this situation. One day, I received an email from my Aunt Emily. She had remained consistently silent on the matter, one of the few who held a neutral stance. I hadn't planned on involving her, but she suggested we talk over coffee. Since Emily wasn't the type to stir up conflict or take sides, I decided to accept her invitation. When we met, she asked about my current situation. Talking with someone who wasn't trying to control me felt comforting, and I was relieved by her concern. After we chatted about recent events for a while, she casually brought up my parents. "Your parents seem very shaken right now," she said, stirring her coffee gently. "They're quite worried about what might happen if this goes to court. But they should have considered that before committing fraud. I suppose they didn't expect you to take things this far," Emily said with a nod. I knew I wanted to avoid being trampled by them again. "I understand how you feel, but what do you really want?" she asked. "Do you want a sincere apology, or do you want your parents to pay for what they've done?" Her question took me by surprise. "I just wanted to understand your ultimate goal," she said. I realized that I hadn't considered things from that perspective before. Part of me wanted to be completely free of this situation, while another part felt my parents should face the consequences of their actions. Maybe I just want them to understand that they can't take me lightly ever again, I replied slowly. I wanted to end this, but I hadn't figured out how. My parents have always been lenient with my sister, no matter the situation, and this time it went even further. I can't simply. Her words were painful, but I appreciated her honesty. I had sensed that this was how my parents thought, too. As she said, they would never admit their mistakes. She hugged me and encouraged me, saying, "Stay strong." Though my parents had always seen me as the family troublemaker, I felt they were the ones who had fractured our family relationships. "This isn't a big deal. You're not in the wrong as a person," she continued, "even if your parents won't admit their faults. Your actions are more sincere than anything they've done to you." After our conversation, I found myself reflecting on what I truly wanted, even though I knew it might place more strain on the family. I began to consider whether to take this to court or if there might be another way to resolve things. A few days later, my lawyer called to inform me that my parents' attorney had proposed an out-of-court settlement. I felt some anxiety considering the legal implications. My parents indicated that they were willing to pay a substantial amount of compensation if I agreed to drop the lawsuit. I felt a desire to move forward. But while I was tempted by their offer, I wasn't sure if I should forgive them so easily. The proposed settlement amount was more than sufficient, as it allowed me to avoid a full-blown legal battle while securing a form of financial justice for their actions. So, with my lawyer, I carefully reviewed the details. The settlement was enough to relieve my financial worries, giving me the freedom to focus on my business without the economic stress that had burdened me for so long. Yet, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the doubt that this might make them believe I had forgiven them. Still, this settlement felt like a kind of victory. In the end, I decided to accept the offer, agreeing to drop the lawsuit, and my parents agreed to pay the compensation. With this, my issues were resolved. But my parents would still face charges from the bank for fraud. It wasn't an ideal outcome, but once the paperwork was completed and everything was officially over, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Having signed everything and closed the lawsuit, I no longer needed to worry about it. However, this decision had definitively altered my relationship with my sister and parents. The family tradition of spending holidays together was gone. And after this resolution, we would no longer gather as a family. While I thought I'd feel relieved, we had now become little more than strangers bound only by blood and shared memories. My decision ended the legal issues, and the settlement allowed me to start my new business on a positive note. But it was difficult to let go completely. Even weeks after the settlement, the events lingered in my mind, and I had to accept that my relationship with my family would never be the same. They were still alive, yet I felt as though I had lost my sister and parents forever. However, I had no desire to reach out, and I knew they would never contact me either. One evening, while I was working on paperwork in my new office, I received an email from my Aunt Emily, simply asking, "How have you been?" Since we hadn't been in touch since meeting a few weeks ago, I was surprised to see her message. In her email, she wrote, "I know it's been difficult, but don't carry everything on your own." Her words had a bigger impact on me than I had expected. Perhaps she had sensed that something was off. I realized just how isolated I had become, losing friends, distancing myself from my family. It meant a lot that she reached out to me. Even though I had no idea what I truly needed to regain a connection with my family, I resolved to stop carrying the burden alone. A few days later, we met again at the same cafe. And when I felt more settled, she looked at me with gentle eyes. "Family isn't always just about blood ties," she said. I was thinking about the settlement, feeling conflicted about accepting the money. I hadn't entirely let go of my resentment toward my parents. Family is something you choose. It's okay to find others who'll be there for you. You don't need to cling to the past, even if your sister or parents aren't close by, she added. Her words resonated deeply. Cutting ties with family, no matter how much pain they'd caused, was like erasing years of seeking my parents' approval, something that had defined much of my life. I thought it was impossible. But as Emily said, I didn't need to stay trapped in the past. Thanks to her, I was able to move forward and start a life where I no longer depended on the people who had hurt me. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. Several weeks passed, and I established my own company. Using the settlement money, I hired employees and began taking on challenges that were both beneficial and achievable on my own. As a result, my days have been incredibly fulfilling. One day, as I was heading home from work, I received a call from an unknown number. Work had become my new source of passion, and for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful about the future. But the past appeared before me in an unexpected way. Something seemed intent on keeping me from leaving the past behind. Yet I tried to ignore it. The caller was my sister, and she said, "I want to talk with you one more time." I hadn't been in contact with her since her engagement was broken off, so hearing her voice left me feeling unsettled. Unlike before, she spoke in a very calm tone. "I just found out that our parents are selling the house," she continued. "I thought you should know what's happened too." Her voice sounded a bit somber. "You probably don't want to hear this from me, but our parents are in debt and have run out of money." Her words left me speechless, and I didn't know how to respond. "They lost everything because of what happened with you." But I realized that this is the result of their own actions, and I felt a little bit of guilt. She whispered, "Our parents brought this upon themselves with their fraud. I don't feel responsible for their financial ruin, but I don't know what to do either." I couldn't fully understand what my sister expected from me. She had been living with a friend, but that situation seemed to have soured as well. Was she seeking my sympathy or perhaps my support? Finally, I managed to reply in a calm tone. "I know this is a very tough situation. I don't know if there's anything I can do, but our parents' choices led to this outcome. They misled other people." She replied right away, "What did our parents want?" I had no intention of provoking a dispute. Our parents weren't completely blameless, in my opinion. She shocked me by being sensitive to the feelings and circumstances of others. However, I was aware of my destination. Seldom had I seen my sister so agitated. The privileged sister, who had grown up with a strong feeling of entitlement, now seemed worried and perplexed. "You must come to that realization on your own," I responded. "Try to be as gentle as you can to it." I had attempted to speak with our parents for years before deciding that I needed to forge my own way. "Perhaps it's time for you to pursue your own goals as well." On the other end of the line, there was a lengthy pause before she answered, "Yes, maybe it is." We hardly exchanged words after that before hanging up. At the time, I wasn't really sure how I felt. I learned a few weeks later that our parents were moving to a smaller home after selling the previous one. But neither my sister's problems nor their financial difficulties seemed to be something I could resolve. I didn't call my folks. I felt that it was time to let go of my desire for their acceptance, which I had always cherished. I was able to do something just for me for the first time. I felt liberated from my parents' demands and authority for the first time in my life. Although it hadn't been an easy path, I was happy to be able to start my business with the settlement money. I am no longer a forgotten person. I am a respected person. I'm going to keep going and make the most of my life. Feeling that familiar knot in my gut, I tightened my hold on the driving wheel as I pulled onto my parents' street. Dinner on Fridays and being treated like the family ATM again. It wasn't getting any easier after 8 months of this. "I'm Naomi, I'm 27, and it seems like the only reason I'm here is to support my elder sister's extravagant lifestyle. Let me take a step back. I went to what I assumed was a typical family dinner 8 months ago. I was mistaken. I was seated for what my parents referred to as a family conversation. There were my sister Vanessa, her husband Derek, and their 2 children, Liam, 2, and Emma, 4. The golden kid has always been Vanessa. She grew up with our parents' full attention, the larger bedroom, and the newer clothing. Being an afterthought became second nature to me. Our parents arranged them an extravagant wedding that they couldn't afford when she married Derek at the age of 22, who was an entrepreneur with lofty goals and inconsistent income. I received a card and supper at Olive Garden after I graduated with honors from college. That evening, 8 months prior, my mother had remarked, "Naomi, we need to discuss something important." It was obvious from her tone that this was not a request. My dad went on to say, Vanessa and Derek need help with their rent. We're going to help them, and we need you to contribute as well. I recall assuming they meant a few $100s. That made enough sense. Family is family, isn't it? We'll be giving them $1,000 a month, Mom explained, and you'll be contributing the same. I nearly choked on my water. $1,000 every month. That's insane. I'm saving for my own place while paying rent myself. Vanessa rolled her eyes. We're renting a 2-bedroom house for the kids. It's expensive, but they need the space. Why can't you get a cheaper place? Or maybe, I don't know, get a job? I asked Vanessa. The looks I got from everyone at the table made me feel like I'd suggested selling one of the children. Derek's career is demanding, Vanessa said defensively. Derek nodded importantly, though his career consisted of sporadic contract work that left them broke more often than not. And I need to be home with the kids, Vanessa added. I can't afford $1,000 a month, I protested. Mom's face hardened. Family sacrifices for family, Naomi. Or have you forgotten how much we've done for you? And there it was, the guilt trip, right on schedule. Last Christmas, I bought Emma and Liam toys from Target instead of the overpriced stuff from that boutique store Vanessa loved. You'd think I'd given them rocks, based on how my family reacted. The entire holiday was ruined by passive-aggressive comments about my thoughtless gifts. So I gave in. Every month for 8 months, I'd been transferring $1,000 to Vanessa, eating ramen more often than I'd like to admit, and watching my savings dwindle. Meanwhile, when Derek had work, they'd post photos of expensive restaurant meals and new toys for the kids. When he didn't, they'd complain about being broke and hit up my parents for extra cash. Today's dinner would be the same old routine, everyone fawning over Vanessa and the kids, Derek talking about his next big project, and me sitting there like a human wallet. I pulled into the driveway, took a deep breath, and prepared for the usual circus. Inside, it was exactly as I predicted. Mom and Dad were on the floor playing with Emma and Liam. Vanessa was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and Derek was telling my dad about his latest guaranteed success project. "Hey," I said, standing in the doorway. No one even looked up, except Dad, who gave a half-hearted wave before turning back to Derek. Dinner was served, and we all sat down, adults at the table, kids playing in the living room. I noticed Mom and Dad exchanging glances, and my stomach dropped. I knew that look. It meant they had another family discussion planned, and those never ended well for me. "Naomi," Mom started, her voice carrying that same authoritative tone from 8 months ago. "We need to have a serious conversation. We've decided to give our house to Vanessa, Derek, and the kids." I looked at my sister and her husband. They weren't surprised at all. They were practically glowing with smug satisfaction. "Vanessa has 2 children," Dad explained, as if I might have forgotten about my niece and nephew in the past 5 minutes. "They need the space, and it's much more economical than continuing to pay rent." That actually made some financial sense, so I nodded slowly. "Okay, so where will you live? Are you getting an apartment?" My parents exchanged another look, this time with small smiles. My blood ran cold. "We won't need to rent," Mom said cheerfully. "We're moving in with you. We'll take the master bedroom, and don't worry about us paying rent, you've got that covered. Though utilities will go up a bit with 3 people, of course." I stared at them, my mouth hanging open. "You can't just decide to move in with me.
I'm 27.
I have my own life, my own routine. I'm trying to date. I can't have my parents living with me." Mom's smile disappeared. "Family requires sacrifices. Naomi, you need to sacrifice for us now." Vanessa nodded smugly. "Don't forget to keep sending me the $1,000 each month, by the way." "What?" I exploded. "Why would I keep sending you money? You're getting a free house." Vanessa looked outraged. "God, you're such an egoist. I have kids, Naomi. Kids need things. I'll find a use for that money." Everyone laughed, except me. This was a joke to them. I was a joke to them. "It's all settled then," Dad said with finality. "We'll be moving in soon." I stood up, my hands shaking. I need to go. I should clear out the master bedroom for you. What I really needed was to get out of there before I screamed or burst into tears or both. I drove home in a rage, my knuckles wide on the steering wheel. Every memory of being overlooked and taken advantage of by my family flooded back at once. The birthdays where my gifts were an afterthought. The time I got a promotion and no one remembered to congratulate me. The countless times I dropped everything to babysit Emma and Liam while Vanessa and Derek went out, never even getting a thank you. What had they ever done for me? Nothing. Not a damn thing. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't going to let them steamroll me again. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and called my landlord, Scott. He was a decent guy in his 50s who owned several buildings in the area. Hey, Scott. It's Naomi from 4B. I have a situation I need to discuss with you. What's up, Naomi? Everything okay with the apartment? I took a deep breath and explained the whole situation. The monthly payments to my sister, my parents giving away their house, and their plan to move in with me without even asking. To my surprise, Scott didn't sound annoyed or inconvenienced. He sounded genuinely sympathetic. Man, that's rough, he said when I finished. My brother-in-law pulled something similar with my wife before we were married. Some people just feel entitled to whatever they want. So, about breaking the lease? I asked hesitantly. Don't worry about it. No penalties. Family drama is the worst, Scott said. Then he paused. Actually, I might have a solution for you. I've got another unit vacant in my building on Maple Street. It's about the same size as your current place, maybe a bit smaller. Rent would be similar. If you want it, it's yours. I couldn't believe my luck. That would be perfect. Thank you so much. No problem. When do you want to move? As soon as possible. Tomorrow if I can arrange movers. Scott laughed. You're not wasting any time. I like that. Come by my office in the morning and I'll have the paperwork ready. After hanging up, I immediately started packing. I worked through the night, fueled by a combination of anger and determination. By morning, I had most of my belongings in boxes. I called a moving company that advertised same-day service and booked them for that afternoon. At Scott's office, I signed the new lease and handed over my current keys. Here are the keys to your new place, he said, sliding them across the desk. What should I do when your parents show up? I grinned. Just tell them I don't live there anymore. Don't give them my new address. The movers arrived at noon, and by evening, I was settling into my new apartment. It wasn't perfectly arranged yet, but it was mine. And more importantly, my family had no idea where it was. 2 days later, I was unpacking the last of my kitchen items when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We're on our way to your apartment with our things. See you soon. I didn't respond. I just waited, imagining the scene that would unfold. Sure enough, about 2 hours later, my phone exploded with calls. I let the first few go to voicemail, savoring the moment. When I finally answered, my mother was already mid-shout. Absolutely unacceptable. Where are you? There's some man at your apartment telling us you don't live there anymore. That's my landlord, I said calmly. And he's right. I moved out a couple of days ago. The silence on the other end was deafening, but short-lived. You what? She screamed, loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How could you do this to us? We're standing here with all our belongings. Where are we supposed to go? Back to your house, I guess. The one you still own. This is outrageous. My father's voice came through now. They must have put me on speaker. Give us your new address immediately. We need to bring our things there. No, I said, surprised by how firm my voice sounded. I'm not giving you my new address because you're not moving in with me, Naomi. My mother was back. You are being cruel and ungrateful. You've put us in a terrible position. That was rich, I said. I put you in a terrible position. You decided to move in with me without asking. You were going to take my bedroom. You never once considered what I wanted or how I felt. You never have. That's not true, My father protested weakly. It is true. Everything has always been about what Vanessa wants, what Vanessa needs. I'm done being the family ATM and doormat. We're your parents, my mother said, her voice catching. You can't just cut us off like this. I'm not cutting you off. I'm setting boundaries. Go back to your house, figure out your own living situation, and maybe when you learn to respect me as an adult, we can talk. I hung up before they could respond. Not even a minute later, Vanessa was calling. I picked up, bracing myself. What the hell is wrong with you? She screeched without preamble. Mom and Dad are coming back to my house now. This is so unfair. You need to take them. Quiet, I said sharply. The command was so unexpected that Vanessa actually stopped talking. I'm done solving your problems, I continued. And I'm done sending you money every month. As of right now, those $1,000 transfers are cancelled. You can't do that, she shrieked, finding her voice again. We need that money. You selfish bastard. After everything, I hung up, blocked her number, and my parents' numbers too. Then, I opened my banking app and cancelled the automatic monthly transfer to Vanessa's account. As I put down my phone, I felt lighter than I had in years. The guilt and obligation that had weighed me down for so long were gone. In their place was something new, pride. I had finally stood up for myself. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I usually couldn't afford, and looked around my new apartment. It wasn't perfectly set up yet. Boxes still littered every surface, but it was mine. My space. My rules. The peace I'd found in my new apartment didn't last long. After about 2 weeks of blissful silence, my extended family started calling. First was Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, Naomi. Sweetie, I haven't seen you in ages. Where are you living now? I'd love to come visit and see your new place. I wasn't born yesterday. Did my mom put you up to this, Aunt Carol? A pause. Well, she might have mentioned she's worried about you. I'm fine. I'm just not sharing my address with anyone right now. Next was Uncle Mike, then my cousin Tiffany, then even my dad's bowling buddy Steve, who I'd met maybe twice in my life. Each call had the same awkward energy, forced casualness, followed by not-so-subtle fishing for my new address. Look, I finally told my grandfather, the last in this parade of family spies, I know Mom and Dad are behind all these calls. I'm not giving anyone my address. Please tell them to stop using you all as their personal investigators. Grandpa had the decency to sound embarrassed. They're just concerned, kiddo. They're concerned about their plans being ruined, not about me, I corrected him. The call stopped after that. I thought maybe they'd finally accepted my decision and were moving on. I was wrong. One Tuesday evening, as I left work, I spotted my parents' blue Subaru parked across the street from my office building. I pretended not to notice them and walked casually to my car in the parking lot. I could see them in my rearview mirror as I pulled out. They were following at a distance, trying and failing to be inconspicuous. I smiled to myself. Did they think they were in some spy movie? I drove directly to the Westfield Mall, occasionally checking my mirror to confirm they were still tailing me. They hung back several cars, but that blue Subaru was unmistakable. When I pulled into the mall parking lot, they found a spot with a clear view of my car. Once inside the mall, I called my friend Rachel. Hey, I need a favor. My parents are literally stalking me. They followed me to the mall, and they're watching my car. Can you pick me up at the north exit? I'll leave through there while they're still watching my car at the south entrance. Girl, I'm on my way. This is the most exciting thing that's happened to me all week. I spent about an hour browsing stores, occasionally peeking out the windows to see my parents still dutifully watching my car. Rachel texted when she arrived, and I slipped out the north exit, grinning as I imagined my parents waiting for hours for me to return to my car. Get in, loser. We're escaping your psycho family, she said as I slid into her car. We both burst out laughing. I can't believe this is my life, I said once I'd caught my breath. My own parents are stalking me. Have you considered a restraining order? Rachel asked, only half joking. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, I replied, though the thought had crossed my mind. Over the next few months, my parents made several more attempts to find my new address. They tried following me from work 2 more times, but I was vigilant. They sent more relatives to call me with increasingly transparent excuses. Eventually, the surveillance stopped. No more mysterious calls from distant relatives. No more parental stakeouts. Nothing. It was strange how quickly I adapted to the silence. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly anxious about family obligations or unexpected financial demands. I started putting the $1,000 I used to send Vanessa into savings each month. I went on dates without worrying about my parents showing up unannounced. I bought a nice couch without feeling guilty about wasting money on myself. I was happy, really, genuinely happy. Then came the email, 2 weeks before Christmas, from Mom, Naomi. I hope this email finds you well. It's been several months since we last spoke, and your father and I have had a lot of time to reflect on our actions. We realize now that we overstepped boundaries and didn't consider your feelings. For that, we are truly sorry. Vanessa wanted me to tell you that she's found a job at the elementary school as an administrative assistant. She and Derek are renting their own apartment now, and they're managing their finances independently. They're doing well. Your father and I are still in our house. After you left, we realized how unreasonable our expectations were. We should never have tried to force ourselves into your life that way. We would very much like to see you this Christmas. Nothing fancy, just family dinner at our house. No demands, no expectations. We miss you, Naomi. We'd like a chance to make things right. Please consider it. You don't need to respond right away. Love, Mom. I read the email 3 times, not quite believing what I was seeing. An apology from my mother, and Vanessa had a job. Was this a genuine olive branch or another manipulation tactic? After a lifetime of being the less favored child, of having my boundaries trampled and my generosity exploited, could I trust this sudden change of heart? I closed the laptop without responding. I needed time to think. That night, I dreamt of childhood Christmases. The way Vanessa would rip open mountains of presents while I carefully unwrapped my much smaller pile. The way Mom would beam when Vanessa hugged her but barely noticed when I did the same. The constant comparison. The persistent feeling that I was somehow less worthy of love and attention. But I also remembered glimpses of genuine connection. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom nursing me through a terrible flu when I was 10, the rare moments when Vanessa and I got along sharing secrets and giggling late into the night before our relationship soured in our teens. Were those moments enough to build a new relationship on? Could we ever have a healthy family dynamic, or would I always be the afterthought, the backup plan, the walking ATM? I didn't have answers. All I knew was that I'd found my strength, my voice, my boundaries. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't lose those again. I stared at my mother's email for days, the cursor hovering over the reply button before I'd close my laptop and walk away. Christmas was a week away, and I still hadn't decided what to do. I drafted and deleted a dozen replies to my mom's email. None of them felt right. Too cold, too forgiving, too tentative. Finally, I wrote, "Mom, I'll come for Christmas dinner. What time should I be? Naomi, we're so happy you're coming. Dinner will be at 5. Your father is making his special prime rib. Just bring yourself. No gifts necessary. Love, Mom." The no gifts necessary part caught my attention. Usually, my family made a big deal about expensive presents, especially for Vanessa's kids. This was different. The week leading up to Christmas was a blur of last-minute work deadlines and holiday preparations. Despite my mom's assurance that gifts weren't necessary, I picked up small presents for everyone. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful tokens. I wasn't going to change who I was just because they might have changed. Christmas Day arrived, cold and clear. I dressed carefully in a sweater I liked, not the one Vanessa had once told me, "At least hide your stomach." I drove to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach, rehearsing responses to potential provocations. If they ask for money, I'm not in a position to help financially right now. If they pressure me about my address, I'm happy with my living situation and prefer to keep it private. If they criticize my life choices, I'll say, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm comfortable with my decisions." I pulled into the driveway, took a deep breath, and approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open. My mother stood there, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. She stepped forward and hugged me, not the perfunctory embrace I was used to, but a real hug, tight and lingering. I stood stiffly for a moment before cautiously returning it. Inside, the house smelled like prime rib and pine. My father appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "There she is," he said, smiling hesitantly. He, too, embraced me, patting my back awkwardly. "Merry Christmas, kiddo. Where are Vanessa and the gang?" I asked, glancing around the suspiciously quiet house. "They'll be here at 5, Mom explained. "We asked you to come early. We wanted some time just with you." This was definitely new. I followed them to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace and 3 mugs of hot chocolate waited on the coffee table. "Naomi," Dad began once we were seated, "we owe you an apology. A real one, not just an email." I nodded, waiting. "We've been unfair to you," Mom continued. "For a long time, not just with the housing situation." She looked down at her hands. "We favored Vanessa. We've taken you for granted. We've treated you like your only value to this family was financial." "Why?" I asked simply. It was the question I'd wanted to ask my entire life. My parents exchanged glances. "Vanessa was always more demanding," Dad explained. "She needed more attention, more help. You were so independent, so capable. We leaned on you because you seemed like you could handle it. We mistook your strength for immunity to being hurt," Mom added. "That was wrong of us." I took a sip of hot chocolate, processing their words. "And Vanessa? Has she had a similar epiphany?" They exchanged another look. "She's working on it," Dad said. "Getting a job has been good for her. Derek, too. He's taken a steady position with an accounting firm." We talked for over an hour, really talked in a way we never had before. They asked about my job, my friends, my new apartment, though they didn't press for the address. I found myself slowly relaxing, cautiously optimistic. At 5, the doorbell rang. Vanessa, Derek, and the kids had arrived. I braced myself for the old dynamic to resurface. Vanessa entered first, the kids trailing behind her. Her eyes found mine immediately. "Naomi," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I replied neutrally. An awkward silence fell, then, to my utter shock, Vanessa stepped forward and hugged me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've been a terrible sister." I froze, completely unprepared for this. Vanessa had never apologized to me for anything in her entire life. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. Dinner was surreal. Vanessa talked about her job with genuine enthusiasm. Derek discussed his new position without a single mention of getting rich quick. The kids were well behaved, and when Emma spilled her juice, Vanessa cleaned it up herself instead of expecting Mom or me to do it. No one asked me for money. No one made passive-aggressive comments about my life choices. No one tried to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. After dinner, as we exchanged the modest gifts we'd all brought, I found myself laughing genuinely at Dad's corny jokes, accepting Mom's compliments without searching for hidden barbs, and actually enjoying my niece and nephew's excited chatter. As I prepared to leave, Mom walked me to the door. "Will you come for New Year's?" she asked tentatively. I paused. Years of being viewed as an afterthought were not erased by one pleasant evening. Rebuilding trust would take time. "Let me think about it." I opened my mouth really. She accepted my boundary without objecting, nodding. One more encouraging indicator. I sat in my car for a while before I turned on the ignition. It had been a good evening. A cynical part of me thought, suspiciously well. Was it all a ruse? When they believed I was back in the fold, would they go back to their old ways? Time would tell. For the time being, though, I felt pleased with myself for showing up and confronting them in my own way. It was unclear if our relationship could be genuinely fixed, but I was convinced that I would never again be the family doormat. My voice had returned, and I had no intention of losing it.